We all do it, right? That gut feeling, that snap judgment. You sort of fill in the blanks about someone or maybe a situation. And sometimes, well, it leads us completely down the wrong path. But what if that's not just, personal failing? What if it's something much deeper, like fundamental to how our brains work?
Oh, it absolutely is. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. This is a deep dive into what's known as jumping to conclusions, or JTC. And it's this really pervasive human thing. It goes way beyond just like common sense snap judgments. We're actually going to explore it using this fascinating, comprehensive scientific study, one that was driven by AI, which gives it a really unique angle.
That's huge. So this deep dive, it's based on some pretty incredible research that pulls together insights from, well, almost everywhere. Psychology, neuroscience, sociology.
History, ethics, even physics and maths get a look in. It's incredibly broad.
Wow. Okay, so our mission here is to really pull out the key takeaways from this study for you, help you understand the science behind JTC, its impact, which is frankly massive on individuals and society, and crucially, how AI might help us get a handle on it, analyze it, maybe even mitigate it for, a more informed future.
Exactly. And here's the central puzzle, the paradox we'll keep circling back to. Jumping to conclusions, while it often causes problems, it actually stems from these adaptive mental shortcuts, things that were absolutely vital for making quick decisions, for survival back in our evolutionary past.
Right, fight or flight stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But the problem is, in our super complex modern world, these same shortcuts, they often lead us to make flawed judgments. It's like our brain is trying to be efficient, but the context has changed.
Okay, let's unpack this then. How is it that our brains are sort of designed to trip us up sometimes?
Well, a key idea here comes from Daniel Kahneman, his famous work on dual process thinking. You've got system one.
System one.
Okay. Think of it as fast, automatic, intuitive. It's effortless. It's how you know 2 + 2 is 4, or understand a basic sentence instantly, no real thought required.
Got it. Quick gut reaction.
Precisely. And then there's system 2.
The slower one.
Much slower. Effortful. Deliberative. This is your logical reasoning, complex calculations when you really have to focus. Now, JTC. That's heavily linked to system 1. Those rapid judgments made without pausing to really think things through, without enough information.
So both systems are running all the time, affecting our choices.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Often completely under the radar. You're switching between them without even noticing.
Okay, so system 1 is built for speed. What are the actual tools it uses, these mental shortcuts you mentioned, and what's the catch?
Right. Those tools are called heuristics. They're essentially rules of thumb, mental shortcuts that let us make quick decisions, especially when we don't have all the facts.
Rules of thumb, okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting, the catch, as you put it. Heuristics are incredibly efficient. I mean, they save massive amounts of time and mental energy.
Life-saving, even sometimes.
Absolutely. In certain critical situations, they can be. But, and this is the big but, that very efficiency, that drive for speed that served us so well.
Yeah.
In today's world, it can lead to poor or rash decisions that might cause more harm than good in the long run. So JTC is kind of a byproduct of this need for speed.
Wow. Okay, so it's deeply ingrained, not just a bad habit. And these heuristics, they sometimes lead to errors. What are those errors called?
Those errors are what we call cognitive biases. They're systematic, predictable ways our thinking deviates from purely rational judgment. Think of them as glitches in the system, but very common glitches.
Glitches. Okay, so what are some of the main ones driving JTC?
Well, a big one is confirmation bias. This is our tendency to actively seek out and interpret information in a way that confirms what we already believe.
So we ignore stuff that contradicts our beliefs.
Often, yes. Or we downplay it significantly. For example, imagine a teacher thinks a quiet student isn't very motivated. They might only notice instances where the student seems disengaged and totally miss times when they're actually putting in a lot of effort.
Huh. It's like wearing blinders that only let you see what you expect to see.
That's a great way to put it. Then there's the availability heuristic. This is where we overestimate how likely something is based purely on how easily examples spring to mind.
Like plane crashes versus car crashes.
Exactly. You hear about a plane crash on the news, it's vivid, it's memorable, so you might overestimate the risk of flying, even though statistically driving is far riskier. Car accidents are just less available in your memory as dramatic events.
Right. Right. Okay, what else? You hear about anchoring bias, too.
Yes, anchoring bias. That's where we give far too much weight to the very first piece of information we get. That first number, that first impression, it acts as an anchor.
And drags everything else towards it.
Pretty much. It influences all subsequent judgments. Think about negotiations. The first offer made, even if it's completely unreasonable, often sets the benchmark, the anchor, for the entire discussion.
I can see that. It really fixes your mindset early on. What about biases related to judging people?
Well, that brings us to the fundamental attribution error, or FAE. This is a really common one. It's our tendency to explain someone else's behavior based on their personality or character.
Like they're just that kind of person.
Exactly. While underestimating the role of the situation or external factors. So, that driver who cuts you off, your immediate thought might be, what a jerk.
Yeah, happens all the time.
But you don't consider they might be racing to the hospital or dealing with some other emergency. We jump to character, not circumstance.
That makes sense. What about loss aversion? That sounds emotional.
It is. Loss aversion means the pain of losing something feels psychologically more powerful than the pleasure of gaining something equivalent.
So losing $100 hurts more than finding $100 feels good.
Generally, yes, much more. This can make us overly cautious, like someone holding on to a failing stock because selling it would mean realizing the loss, making it concrete. They might miss out on better investments just to avoid that pain.
That's powerful. And the framing effect, how information is presented.
Precisely. The framing effect shows how the way information is presented, the frame, influences our choices, even if the underlying facts are identical. A classic example is a medical treatment. People are often more likely to choose one described as having a 90% success rate than one described as having a 10% failure rate.
Even though it's the same thing.
Exactly the same data, just framed differently. And one more key one, overconfidence bias.
Thinking we're better than we are.
Essentially, yes, overestimating our own knowledge, abilities, or the accuracy of our judgments. Think of an investor who's convinced they can beat the market without doing any real research. That's overconfidence, and it can lead to pretty risky decisions.
Okay, so we've got confirmation, availability, anchoring, FAE, loss aversion, framing, overconfidence. Quite a list. Are these the main ways JTC actually shows up?
They're major contributors. And the study highlights 3 really common manifestations of JTC that often result from these biases. First is mind reading.
Assuming you know what others think.
Exactly. Making assumptions about people's thoughts or intentions, usually negative ones, like thinking, oh, everyone at this party thinks I'm awkward, or my boss definitely thinks I'm incompetent.
Without any real evidence.
Usually without any solid evidence. Then there's fortune telling. This is holding really rigid, often negative predictions about the future.
Like, I'm definitely going to fail this exam.
Precisely. Or there's no point trying to date, I'll just get rejected anyway. It's assuming a negative outcome is inevitable.
And the last one.
Labeling. This is when we overgeneralize, often using broad, negative terms to describe ourselves, others, or situations. Instead of I made a mistake, it becomes I am a failure. Or labeling someone based on one action.
Right. So these biases, they don't just operate alone, do they? They interact.
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial point. They often feed into each other. Confirmation bias can be amplified by the availability heuristic, for instance. If the examples that readily come to mind also happen to confirm your existing belief,
then that belief gets even stronger. A feedback loop.
Exactly. It creates this self-perpetuating cycle that makes it really hard to see things objectively.
So this isn't just psychology, is it? The study talks about biology, even evolution. It's like JTC is hardwired.
In a way, yes. It's framed as an evolved optimization strategy. Our brains evolved these shortcuts because, historically, quick, good enough decisions were often better for survival than slow, perfect ones.
Faster is safer sometimes.
Right. And there's evidence for a genetic component, too. Some biases seem to be somewhat heritable. Neurologically, specific brain circuits are involved, particularly involving the frontal lobe for decision-making, and the limbic system, like the amygdala, for emotions and threat detection.
The amygdala, right? Fear center.
Exactly. And under stress, for example, the amygdala can become more active, potentially pushing us towards more negative biases or faster System 1 type thinking. So yeah, it's not just a bad habit, it's a deeply embedded feature of how our brains are structured and function.
That changes the perspective completely. It's not just thinking wrong, it's how we're built. What about other fields? Philosophy, math.
It connects in fascinating ways. Philosophers, going way back, warned against rushing to judgment. Think of ancient skeptics advising us not to let our assent run ahead of actual knowledge. Now, it's important to distinguish cognitive biases, these deep-seated tendencies, from logical fallacies, which are more like errors in the structure of an argument. But both can lead to distorted beliefs.
So biases are the wiring. Fallacies are mistakes in using the wiring.
That's a decent analogy. And epistemologically, thinking about how we know what we know, these biases fundamentally shape our perception, creating a kind of subjective reality for each of us. There's also this ongoing debate. Are these shortcuts truly adaptive overall, or have they become maladaptive in our complex world? And yes, the study even uses mathematical modeling to track how these biases might propagate through populations, and draws analogies to physics, like quantum mechanics, to conceptualize the inherent uncertainty in human decision-making.
Uncertainty. Like, we can't perfectly predict our own choices.
Something like that. It suggests our judgment isn't always this clear, deterministic calculation we might imagine it to be.
Okay, understanding the how and why is huge.
Yeah.
But let's talk impact. What does this actually mean for you, for the listener, in day-to-day life?
The impact is really significant, often in subtle ways you might not immediately connect to JTC. In relationships, for example, constantly jumping to negative conclusions about your partner, your friends, your colleagues.
That mind-reading thing again.
Exactly. Assuming the worst, like, they're definitely mad at me or they think I'm stupid. That fosters suspicion, misunderstanding, and conflict, even if your assumptions are totally off base.
Yeah, I can see how that would poison things. What about our own heads? Mental health.
Oh, definitely. For mental health, JTC can be a major player in anxiety and depression. That fortune-telling bias, always predicting negative outcomes, can deepen feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. Nothing will ever work out. I'll always feel this way. In fact, JTC is recognized as a common thinking pattern in conditions like panic disorder and even psychosis. It really highlights how fundamental these cognitive patterns are to our well-being.
And just our everyday choices. Getting a job, deciding what to study.
Absolutely. In personal decisions, JTC clouds our judgment. If you fortune tell that you'll fail an exam, you might not bother studying properly, kind of fulfilling your own prophecy. Or maybe you want to ask someone out, but you mind read and assume they'll say no, so you never take the chance. You jump to a conclusion that prevents you from even trying, potentially missing out on something great. It distorts reality and stops us making the best choices for ourselves.
It really paints a picture of how we can sabotage ourselves without even realizing it.
Sure.
So, okay, that's the individual level. What about the bigger picture? Society, history. The study had some powerful examples there.
It really does. And looking back historically, you can see the fingerprints of these biases on major events. The persecution of Galileo, classic confirmation bias. The church hierarchy held a strong belief, Earth at the center, and dismissed overwhelming evidence to the contrary because it didn't fit.
They couldn't see past their existing truth.
Precisely. Or think about the attack on Pearl Harbor. The vividness and shock of that event, the availability heuristic in action, led to an exaggerated fear of Japanese Americans, contributing to the terrible decision of internment.
Wow. And the Salem witch trials.
Another stark example. Confirmation bias, looking for evidence to confirm suspected witchcraft, combined with the availability heuristic, where accusations and patterns seemed readily available, even if baseless. It created a deadly feedback loop.
It's chilling. What about things like the Titanic or the Vietnam War?
Those often get linked to the sunk cost fallacy, which is related to loss aversion. The idea is because so much money, time, or effort has already been invested.
You feel like you have to keep going, even if it's clearly not working.
Exactly. You keep throwing good money after bad or committing more resources to a failing venture because acknowledging the loss and changing course feels too painful. Warnings about the Titanic's safety or the mounting costs and questionable progress in Vietnam were arguably downplayed because of resources already sunk.
So it's not just individuals, entire cultures, governments, they fall into these traps.
Absolutely. Cultural dynamics are heavily shaped by JTC. Think about stereotypes. Our brains naturally categorize information it's efficient. But this can easily slip into stereotyping when we overgeneralize traits to entire groups.
Mental shortcuts again.
Right. And confirmation bias locks those stereotypes in place. We notice things that fit the stereotype and ignore things that don't. The media can amplify this by selectively reporting information. And interestingly, when our brains are under heavy load, stressed, tired, we tend to rely more on these simple stereotypes.
So prejudice gets passed down.
It can, yes. Biased information is more likely to be remembered and shared if it aligns with existing biases, potentially distorting cultural knowledge across generations.
And in governance and policymaking, surely leaders are trained to avoid this.
You'd hope so, but they're human too. Policymakers are definitely susceptible. Confirmation bias can lead to political polarization, only listening to arguments from your own side. The availability heuristic can make leaders overreact to recent vivid events while ignoring larger, slower-moving problems.
Like focusing on a minor scandal instead of long-term economic trends.
Could be. Anchoring bias can mean that early proposals or data points have an outsized influence on the entire policy process. Think about the lead up to the 2008 financial crisis. Widespread optimism bias and confirmation bias arguably led many to ignore warning signs.
And climate change policy.
Another area where biases like short-term thinking, confirmation bias, and the framing of the issue significantly hinder progress. Even how we choose leaders can be swayed, things like the bandwagon effect, where people support a candidate just because they seem popular.
This feels like it really bleeds into our sense of right and wrong, too. Ethics, morality. How does JTC mess with that?
It does, often unconsciously. Making sound ethical decisions usually requires careful, deliberate thought system too, but biases can subtly steer us off course. Confirmation bias, for example, might lead someone to interpret a situation in a way that justifies a questionable action they want to take. It creates a sort of ethical echo chamber.
It must be okay because...
Exactly. Optimism bias might make us underestimate the potential negative consequences of an ethically dubious choice. Self-serving bias helps us rationalize actions that benefit us, even at others' expense. And groupthink, the pressure to conform within a group, can lead people to go along with unethical decisions they might question individually.
So our very judgment of what's right can be skewed from the start.
It can be. Our moral development ideally shifts from just looking at outcomes to considering intent. But JTC, that premature judgment, can still short-circuit that process, especially in complex situations.
And the study mentioned implicit biases, specifically in this ethical context.
Yes, and this is crucial. Implicit biases are those unconscious attitudes or stereotypes we hold that can influence our behavior without us even realizing it, even if we consciously reject prejudice.
Like hidden biases.
Exactly. Research shows they can manifest in critical areas. For instance, in child welfare, implicit biases might lead to disproportionate reporting rates against certain communities. In healthcare, they can affect how doctors interact with patients, influencing diagnosis and treatment, leading to disparities in care.
Even if the person genuinely believes they are being fair.
That's the insidious nature of implicit bias. There's growing public awareness, but translating that awareness into real, systemic change to counteract these biases in institutions like healthcare or the justice system, that's still a major challenge.
Okay, this raises a really important question. If JTC is so widespread and often harmful, who actually benefits from it? And who ends up paying the price?
That's a great question, and the study breaks it down clearly. Who benefits? Well, sometimes you do, in a purely survival sense. In immediate danger, that quick heuristic that JTC could save your life.
The adaptive part.
Right. But others benefit too. People who want to manipulate others, think certain political leaders, marketers, advertisers. They can intentionally exploit biases like FOMO, fear of missing out, or the bandwagon effect to influence your behavior.
Get you to buy something or vote a certain way.
Precisely. Groups trying to enforce conformity also benefit, in a sense. In-group favoritism strengthens group bonds, even if it's at the expense of fairness to outsiders. And, maybe most fundamentally, our own brains benefit from the cognitive ease. JTC avoids the hard work of System 2 thinking. It's efficient. It saves energy.
So there's an immediate payoff, even if it's just mental laziness sometimes. But who are the losers? Who bears the cost?
Well, who is the victim and loser? Firstly, individuals making those poor decisions suffer. Strained relationships, missed opportunities, financial mistakes, self-sabotage. It all adds up. Then, obviously, the targets of prejudice and discrimination pay a heavy price. Stereotyping fueled by JTC leads to real-world disadvantages and unequal treatment for marginalized groups in housing, employment, justice, you name it.
Society as a whole loses out too.
Definitely. Societies become fragmented and conflicted. JTC fuels echo chambers, political polarization, the spread of misinformation. It stalls progress on important policies because consensus is harder to reach. It can even escalate into intergroup conflict. Justice systems suffer when impartiality is compromised by biased judgments. And ultimately, human progress itself is hindered when we cling tightly to false beliefs and resist new evidence, stifling critical thinking and innovation.
So the takeaway is immediate cognitive ease, but potentially huge long-term costs.
That sums it up well. The efficiency is tempting, but the widespread, often unconscious application of JTC carries significant risks for individuals and society.
Okay, this feels daunting. Like, we're biologically and socially predisposed to these errors. Is there really any hope? How can we genuinely fight back against our own wiring?
That's the core question, isn't it? And this is where the AI perspective from the study becomes so powerful. It's not about suddenly erasing these tendencies, they're part of us. It's about gaining a new kind of objective insight into them.
Like holding up a mirror.
A very sophisticated mirror. Think of AI not as a replacement for human thought, but as an incredibly powerful analytical tool. It can process vast amounts of data and detect patterns of bias that are simply invisible to the unaided human mind. It's like an X-ray for our collective cognitive habits.
An X-ray for bias. I like that. What can this AI X-ray actually do? What are its capabilities?
Well, it brings objectivity. AI can perform pattern analysis on huge data sets, text, social media, historical records to find subtle, recurring biases humans would likely miss. It can use sentiment analysis to evaluate the emotional tone of language, flagging potentially biased communication.
So it can spot coded language, maybe?
Potentially, yes. Comparative analysis lets it compare JTC patterns across different groups, cultures, or time periods. Natural language processing, NLP, is huge here. AI can analyze job descriptions for gendered language, for instance, and even suggest more neutral alternatives.
That's practical.
Very. There are also bias detection frameworks designed specifically to find hidden prejudices in data sets, or even within other AI systems that might have learned human biases. AI can perform data regularization to clean and standardize data, reducing the impact of skewed inputs. And it can help address sparse data issues, ensuring that lack of data from certain groups doesn't automatically lead to biased conclusions based on majority data.
So the goal is better self-awareness, using AI to see ourselves more clearly.
Exactly. It's about fostering a deeper understanding of our own cognitive distortions, which is the first step towards making more conscious, objective decisions.
Okay, if an AI were to map this all out, this JTC phenomenon, it would be like this giant tangled web, right?
Absolutely. You could visualize it as a complex schematic. At the core, you'd have the cognitive mechanisms, system one, heuristics, the specific biases we talked about.
Yeah.
Layered onto that would be a biological and environmental influences, genetics, brain structure, stress, culture. Then branching out, you'd see the individual manifestations, impacts on relationships, mental health, personal choices.
And then broader.
Broader still, the societal manifestations. How JTC shapes culture, history, governance, economics. Then a distinct layer for the ethical and moral consequences, linking back to who benefits and who loses. And crucially, you'd need to show the feedback loops, how societal conflicts reinforce biases, how media misinformation strengthens confirmation bias, and so on. And finally, overlaying it all, you'd map out the potential mitigation points where interventions could actually make a difference.
Wow. That really emphasizes the complexity. It's not just one thing. So AI can see this web more clearly. Can it also predict things or construct arguments based on this data?
Yes, it can go beyond just description. AI can construct logical arguments by identifying systematic patterns in enormous data sets that would overwhelm a human researcher. For example, analyzing millions of online comments to trace precisely how echo chambers form and solidify, revealing the flawed logic driving polarization.
So it can map the spread of bad ideas.
Yeah, in a way, yes. And it can develop predictive models. Based on understanding the mechanisms and historical data, AI can forecast potential future outcomes. This could involve societal conflict prediction, assessing the risk of intergroup tension based on analyzing language for signs of increasing hostility or dehumanization.
That sounds potentially very useful, but also a bit scary.
It requires careful ethical consideration, absolutely. Other examples include policy outcome forecasting, modeling how a new policy might be received or interpreted by a public influenced by certain biases. Or, even though this is highly complex, modeling potential individual behavioral trajectories based on known JTC patterns.
So the key here is that AI isn't making the decisions.
No, definitely not. Its role is to provide objective intelligence, to help us see the hidden biases, the flawed reasoning, the potential consequences. It empowers humans to make more informed choices, to design more targeted interventions. It's about augmenting human judgment, not replacing it.
Okay, that makes sense. So knowing all this, understanding the mechanisms, seeing the impact, leveraging AI insights, what can we actually do practically? How can you, listening right now, reduce your own tendency to jump to conclusions?
It really starts with individual awareness and effort. The study points to several key strategies. Cultivating awareness is foundational. Tools like implicit association tests, even just consciously paying attention to your gut reactions, can help reveal biases you didn't know you had.
Just noticing it is the first step.
Absolutely. Then, allowing time for deliberation. Literally pausing before reacting or deciding. Create that space for System 2 to engage. Step back. Don't just run on autopilot.
The pause and plan idea.
Exactly. Engaging in critical thinking and questioning is vital. Challenge your own assumptions. Ask, what's the evidence for this? Are there alternative explanations?
Yeah.
Deliberately seek disconfirming evidence. Look for information that contradicts your initial belief, not just confirms it.
That takes conscious effort.
It does. Embracing intellectual humility is part of that, accepting that you might be wrong, that your perspective isn't the only valid one. Mindfulness practices can also help enormously, training you to observe your thoughts and feelings, including biased ones, without immediately acting on them.
Okay. And reflecting on mistakes.
Yes. Reflection on past experiences where you maybe jumped to a wrong conclusion can teach valuable lessons. And finally, fostering a growth mindset, believing that you can improve your thinking processes, that these aren't fixed traits. A lot of these techniques, by the way, overlap with principles from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Right. Actively changing thought patterns. What about bigger changes? Society level. Policy.
On the societal front, there are several angles. Government initiatives can play a role. Using nudging techniques like changing defaults to encourage better choices, the organ donation example is classic. Setting it as opt-out dramatically increases rates compared to opt-in.
Subtle shifts with big effects.
Exactly. Governments can also institutionalize bias awareness. Creating dedicated teams, sometimes called red teams or behavioral insights units, whose job is specifically to look for and counteract bias in policy development. Strategic policy framing matters too, presenting policies in ways that resonate positively, like focusing on the health benefits of climate action.
And using AI itself in government.
Yes. Promoting the use of unbiased AI for tasks like auditing government job postings for discriminatory language or analyzing data for disparities.
Education seems key too.
Hugely important. Educational programs need to integrate critical thinking skills right from an early age. Bias awareness training in workplaces, healthcare settings, and elsewhere can make a difference, especially if it's ongoing and practical. And crucially, education needs to promote diverse perspectives to challenge in-group thinking.
Like public health campaigns for cognitive health.
That's a great analogy. Large-scale awareness campaigns could normalize the conversation about bias. And let's not forget the power of societal movements. Activist groups have historically been crucial in challenging deeply ingrained prejudices and pushing for systemic reforms. They educate, they advocate, they lobby for change.
You see so much division, cultural intolerance, even aggression.
Yeah.
How does JTC fuel that specifically?
Well, the study connects JTC directly to the roots of conflict. That in-group, out-group bias we talked about, that's fundamental, creating an us versus them mentality. It makes cooperation harder and conflict easier.
And confirmation bias keeps us locked in our group's view.
Exactly. You selectively process information to reinforce your group's narrative and negative views of the other side. This really entrenches disagreement and misunderstanding.
And it can escalate to something much darker, right?
Yeah.
Dehumanization.
Tragically, yes. That's often the next step in severe conflict. Dehumanization is the process where the outgroup is portrayed and perceived as less than human, as animals, vermin, monsters. This strips away the psychological barriers, like empathy, that normally prevent violence.
History has horrific examples.
It does. Think of propaganda used in the Rwandan genocide or by the Nazis. This process is often fueled by underlying beliefs about the outgroup, that they are inherently inferior or immoral, that your own group is facing injustice or vulnerability because of them, deep distrust and a sense of helplessness against their perceived threat.
How do you even begin to counteract that?
It's incredibly difficult, but strategies focus on increasing positive intergroup contact, promoting cooperative activities where groups have to work together towards common goals, and raising awareness through education about these psychological mechanisms themselves.
Okay, let's pull this all together. If we can really get a better handle on JTC, understand it, mitigate it, what's the bigger picture? What kind of society could we build?
Well, minimizing JTC fosters the potential for much rational leadership. Leaders who prioritize critical thinking, objectivity, evidence, and diverse perspectives over appealing to biases or making rash decisions.
And public discussion.
You'd hope for more informed public discourse. Less polarization, more openness to considering different viewpoints, more focus on evidence-based arguments. That's absolutely vital if we're going to tackle huge global challenges like climate change, pandemics, sustainable development.
Things that require cooperation and rational thinking.
Exactly. Understanding JPC should also lead to greater empathy and intergroup harmony. If we recognize our shared tendency towards bias and actively work against prejudice and dehumanization, we can build bridges and foster more peaceful coexistence. And overall, it cultivates more resilient decision-making at all levels: personal, organizational, governmental. A culture that values thorough information gathering, that actively challenges assumptions, that accepts uncertainty and complexity.
So the goal isn't to become robots, to eliminate System 1.
Not at all. That's impossible, and System 1 is often useful. The goal is understanding. Understanding the mechanisms, recognizing when heuristics are helpful and when they're likely to lead us astray. Developing strategies to harness the benefits while mitigating the downsides. It's about empowering ourselves individually and collectively to make more conscious, more ethical, more effective choices. That's the path towards, hopefully, a healthier, better educated, and more balanced global society.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into jumping to conclusions, it's really peeled back the layers on something that feels simple but is incredibly complex. A cognitive habit rooted deep in our biology, often unconscious.
But with profound impacts on our relationships, our mental health, big historical events, societal divisions, even our moral compass.
And the role of AI here feels critical, not as a judge, but as that objective mirror, that X-ray, helping us see these hidden patterns in ourselves and our societies.
Exactly. It's analytical pattern detection, sentiment analysis, bias detection. It offers a lens we simply haven't had before. It's about enhancing human understanding, not replacing human judgment.
So looking ahead, the takeaways seem clear. We need to really prioritize cognitive education, teaching critical thinking and bias awareness early on.
Definitely. And foster environments in workplaces and communities, in government that encourage pausing, deliberation, and seeking diverse viewpoints. Using AI thoughtfully as a tool for bias detection and mitigation is also key.
And on a human level, promoting empathy, encouraging positive contact between groups to break down those us versus them barriers.
Absolutely. And fostering a kind of societal growth mindset, seeing mistakes, including our own biased judgments, not as failures, but as opportunities to learn and improve, that builds resilience.
It really feels like the future hinges on this kind of collaboration, doesn't it? Humans using AI's analytical power to understand the quirks of our own minds, moving beyond just reacting, beyond jumping to conclusions.
Towards a future built more on rationality, on empathy, on a real commitment to solving problems together and finding a more balanced way to live on this planet.
So for you listening, maybe the challenge is to start noticing it. Notice those moments where you jump to a conclusion in your own life, in the news, online, and now hopefully you have a deeper framework for understanding why it happens and maybe, just maybe, how to catch yourself next time.
This is DigitView.